I think some of this he definitely brought on himself towards the end of his career, but, he brought a winning attitude to this team, which was sorely lacking. So let me share some sound here. This is Randy Moss talking about his former coach, Dennis Green. Takes just a second here.
No, he gave me a chance. I remember him on draft day calling me on the phone and asking me, was I ready to become a Viking? And I told him yes. Just hearing about him passing today and just, reading a lot of the comments and a lot of the positive things that people are saying, Denny Green was just that. Those are just not words that people are saying, and the words that people are printing. The things that they're saying about this man is very true. He meant a lot to me. He meant a lot to others. Me meeting him in 1998, a lot of football fans out there in the world, look at us as entertainers and, drafted me to Minnesota that year, along with bringing Randall Cunningham, Brad Johnson, Randall McDaniel, Chris Carter, a lot of other guys out there on the team. We had a team, and one thing he taught us was to play to one beat. There's only one ball. We have to play to one beat. So, his legacy will live on, and like I said, my condolences to his family.
Hey, and that's the great one, Randy Moss, Super Bowl homeboy, talking about his former coach, Dennis Green. Play to one beat. Dennis Green being remembered as a player's coach, I think we're seeing why here. Let's take a listen to Chris Carter, the Hall of Famer, and see what he has to say. He was on the Colin Cowherd show, and this is what Chris has to say about his former coach.
His leadership in taking over the Vikings, and I had already been there for a couple years and was really maturing and developing and really starting to find myself as a human being and as an athlete. But I don't think my career would have been the same without Denny Green, because the one thing he realized after watching the tape, Tom Moore, legendary offensive coordinator, he had Tom call me and say, Chris Carter has to be on the field. Like, we're going to win. So he started the 3-receiver offense and said, you're going to be the first big slot receiver. So we're going to use you in the slot, use you outside, not just utilize you in the red zone. So as you can see through my productivity, but that was just one part of Denny Green. He also developed me as a man. He really challenged me as a leader, gave me a great deal of responsibility. And I just heard your show coming on before, and you guys were talking about giving people second chances. No one took more second chances on human beings than Dennis Green. If you look at his track record, the players he drafted, the players he fell in love with, a lot of those were about second and third chances, because Denny Green, he was all about that.
From the outside, I only met him once or twice. Big personality, could be a very funny guy. He always did strike me as a father figure. When I watch Belichick, I don't see a father figure, or Coughlin perhaps. Maybe I'm wrong. When I see Denny Green, I think father figure. Am I right or wrong?
You're definitely right. And if you look at a lot of the players that had success with him were guys that didn't have father figures. Myself and Randy Moss were the biggest examples of that. And he grew up in an era, that my dad was familiar with, but he provided, that type of fatherly figure. I was able to talk to him about the things that I was going through as a man. And I would say definitely a father figure, but also as an African-American, he really pushed the African-American players to fulfill their roles, not only as fathers, but in society, to have a voice, make your life mean something. And, he grew up in an era where Muhammad Ali, all the greats, Kareem at the time, Jim Brown, those are guys that had an influence on him. So privately, that influence was put on me, and what a dynamic, director of talent. That's what people don't. He could see talent. And from the wide receiver, that was his favorite position, I would say. Man, he knew wide receiver, and he knew the position, and that came from coaching Jerry and being involved with.
Oops, and that audio kind of cut out there, but you get the gist of it. Chris Carter telling you how he feels about his coach. One thing that I wanted to do before we end this show tonight, and we are definitely in the home stretch here, I wanted to read a letter by Tony Dungy that, normally I wouldn't take the time to go through this verbatim, but I think it would be a disservice not to, because I'm going to tell you real quick after this letter about some of Denny's detractors, some of the things that were rumored to go on here in the Minnesota press to allegedly help bring Dennis Green down. But Tony Dungy wrote a letter titled "What We All Owe Dennis Green," and I'll be as fast and concise as I can on this. This again by Tony Dungy. In 1992, I was defensive coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings under head coach Dennis Green. We were playing pretty well with an 8-3 record in late November when Denny called me into his office. It was a late Monday afternoon heading into our week's preparation against the Rams. "We're going to make a quarterback change," Dennis told me. "I'm going to switch from Rich Gannon to Sean Salisbury." The offensive struggled a little, and Denny explained why he was doing it. He said the defense might have to carry us for a while. But I left the office wondering, why is Denny doing this? Why is he talking to me about the quarterback? I'm coaching the defense. He could just make the change, announce it, and I'd do my job. I didn't understand the real reason until later. This was part of his way of helping me get ready to sit in that chair one day, to make the kind of tough decisions as a head coach that many people take for granted and might not understand. You're winning. Why change? Because the head coach gets paid to see the whole team and to make decisions that are best for the whole team. And Denny wanted me to know why he was doing this. So one day, if I was ever in the same position, I wouldn't hesitate to make such a big call when I was coach of a first-place team. When Denny died last week, it was heartbreaking to lose a good friend and to see his family lose a loving father and husband. But I also began to think of how indebted I am to him and how indebted so many coaches, African-American coaches and white coaches, are to him. I've never been around a head coach who cared so much about members of his staff and wanted to put his staff in positions to succeed the way he did. Denny was an excellent football coach. He took struggling college teams, Northwestern and Stanford, and made them much better. He got the Vikings to 2 conference title games. He was terrific in raising the Arizona program. But to me, his legacy is that of a coach who made other coaches better. I'm a couple weeks away from one of the biggest honors of a football player or coach can experience, and that's induction into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. No one ever gets there without help from scores, maybe hundreds of people. For me, one of the most important people in my journey is Dennis Green. In fact, as I reflect on it this morning, there's no way I'd ever have the success I had as an NFL coach without the mentoring and guidance I got from Denny and the team building and leadership skills I've learned from him. Denny wanted to win. He wanted Super Bowls, but he sensed the bigger picture. For him, it was about helping every player, every coach reach his potential. For him, when it comes to coaches, it wasn't just about the African-American coach like me and Tyrone Willingham. He helped us both immensely, but he did the same things for Brian Billick and Mike Tice and so many others. He wanted to see the league be better by having guys climb the ladder like he did and maximize their potential. Ooh, excuse me. You may wonder, how does a coach help his staff maximize potential? 3 years into my job working under Denny in 1994, the Eagles called me and asked permission to interview me for their head coaching job. Denny called me into his office. He handed me something. "This might help you out," he said. I took into my hands a 4-page document he'd put together with tips for head coaching interviews. He thought of everything. And we went over it together, covering all the things he thought the Eagles would ask me. What's the most important thing you'll do in the first week on the job? What do you want to accomplish in the first month? How do you want to work on personnel? How will you and your coaches work with scouts? What do you want from scouts were some of the questions. I mean, there were so many things I never thought of. And if Denny didn't drill me on them, I would have struggled to answer so many of those questions. Will you want to have a radio show? Who knows? That was so unimportant to me. But Denny felt I needed to be ready for everything. And I was. A year later, after some more fine-tuning, I interviewed with Tampa Bay, so ready for that interview, and I finally got my chance to be a head coach. The other thing I didn't know at the time but learned later is how much Denny Green did for his coaches without them knowing. He'd pick up the phone and call owners and universities on behalf of assistants. That's the kind of thing you never forget, and those of us who worked for Denny never forgot it. When I was coaching the Bucs after the 2000 season, I was looking for a quarterback coach. Denny called me and said he knew someone I should look at, Jim Caldwell, the head coach at Wake Forest University. He said, I think you should interview him. He's a good fit. He'll fit in well with your staff, and I think you'll like him. And I did that, and Jim and I hit it off immediately. I hired him. He was a tremendous quarterback coach for us in Tampa and Indianapolis. Now he's been the head coach of the Colts and the Lions, and the players swear by him. Denny helped Jim get into the NFL, but not by strong-arming anyone to hire him, but simply by saying, just talk to him and you'll be impressed. Observing Denny for 4 years, I learned so much that I put into my own coaching book. That's the biggest thing he preached, was that every person in the organization, no matter what job they had, was a vital part of helping the team win. Larry Fitzgerald was a ball boy on a couple of Dennis Green's early Vikings teams, and I'm sure Denny told Larry he was going to help the team by working hard and being the best ball boy he could be. He used to take pride in the fact that we might not have the most talented 53-man roster in the league, but every one of those players was going to have a role. Every player would be great at the role that they had, and each player would do something to help win that year. Denny also let his coaches coach. He believed in hiring people and letting them work. He told me, this is the way I want my defense to look. It's your job to get it done. And he allowed me to make the decisions I felt I had to make to get it done. He did this with his entire staff. That allowed him to concentrate on the overall team. So I'll just wind it up. Last paragraph. There's one last story to me that tells you all you need to know about Denny Green. In 1998, we were coaching against each other in the same division. I was in Tampa, Denny obviously in Minnesota. We'd start to play better and had become a playoff contender. That year, we got 2 Monday night games, and I had forgotten exactly how Denny adapted the schedule around Monday night games when we were together. Even though we were now competitors, I felt comfortable calling him and asking him for advice on setting the schedule, and of course, he helped me. It wasn't in his team's best interest to help the opposition, but Denny did it because he wanted to see me, one of his guys, do well. And he did it because Dennis Green always helped. Folks, there you go. Dennis Green. Now, it wasn't always pretty up here in Minnesota. Towards the end, Dennis Green did have issues. The press started going very hard on him. There was an infamous rumor that certain members of the Twin Cities media had a quote-unquote cabal meeting, which was these reporters supposedly met literally in their own situation room off the grid somewhere and made a vow that they were going to get Dennis Green fired. Bad press. Bad, information. And remember, this is a time now before social media, so the fans are driven by what they're reading in the newspaper. Sports radio is just starting to take off, in the mid-90s. So that's still somewhat of a new medium there. And you got to realize, man, nowadays we got all this stuff at our disposal. Back then, no way. So, Dennis Green made some missteps here. There were some sexual harassment allegations. There were some very interesting post-game news conferences with certain members of the media. And I will say this. The Minneapolis spokesman, I think it's called, the African-American, the black newspaper in town, Larry Fitzgerald's father, Larry Fitzgerald Sr., is the sports writer there, the sports editor there. He is very, very close with Dennis Green, or was very close with Dennis Green. And he, to this day, and you can go Google, he has articles out there talking about how he thought it was very racist of these folks up here, how they ran Denny out amongst some other African-American coaches up here in the Twin Cities. And I find it very interesting that a lot of the local media this week did in fact admit that race did play into this a little bit with some people that they know. And I thought, you know, maybe we're moving forward a little bit. At least people are starting to admit it now. So it's not just black people crying, hey, you know, it's racist.